We're talking today with Mr. Robert Kriegbaum of Grand Rapids, Michigan. The interviewer is James Smither of Grand Valley State University. Mr. Kriegbaum, can you begin by telling us a little bit about your own background? Where were you born, for instance?
I was born in Richmond, Indiana, in 4th of December 1922. I attended Richmond High School, where I graduated in June 1941.
Okay. Now, what did your family do?
My father was an engineer with the International Harvester Company at that time. And we lived comfortably in the city there. And I have three sisters that I shared the home with. And we had our good times and our troubled times, leave me alone, Bob, and all that sort of thing. But on the whole, they're all three living yet today, and I love them all.
Okay.
Yeah.
And your father then is able to keep his job during the Depression and all of that?
He did, and it had to be because his work was with the farmer, and the farmer fed the nation, And so he did, his pay, as I recall, was reduced from time to time, but he still did receive a salary. And the company itself was having troubles with the union, and it was a very bad situation. And finally, the company closed down their plant in Richmond, and my father was moved to Chicago, where his office was downtown Chicago in one of the buildings there as an experimental engineer. What his job entailed was taking the new farm implements out in the field and testing them and seeing what they could do to make them better and that sort of thing.
When did he have to move to Chicago?
Well, he moved to Chicago before the war ended. I would think it would be about 1944.
Okay. But it was after you had gone off to the Army?
Yes, it was after I had gone from the home.
Okay. So let's then go back there. You finished high school in June of 41.
Yes.
That's before Pearl Harbor.
Yes.
And at that time, were you paying any attention to the news in the world and the war in Europe or any of that?
Well, frankly, not too much. I was a student. After my high school days, that next fall, I went enrolled in Purdue University, and it was there that I got my initial training in field artillery from the ROTC unit we all had to take, and so theirs happened to be field artillery. Then the war came, December the 7th, 1941.
Do you remember where you were or when you heard about Pearl Harbor? Or?
Yes, I do. I was in a fraternity at Purdue and Kappa Sigs, and we were just shocked, really, that it happened. But of course, there's not much you can do about it, and so you just go on. I was able to attend school until I was drafted. I went back to Purdue the fall of 42, and then my draft board seemed to think, well, this guy we could use in the service, and so in February 43, they sent me my letter to report to the draft board.
Okay. Now, were a lot of your friends enlisting at that point?
Yes, most of my friends enlisted, and they all enlisted to where they wanted to go. What outfit or what time. And most of them chose the Air Force, so they were down in Florida basking in the sun with the Air Force training and that sort of thing.
And did you think about enlisting, or did you just decide
No, I did not want to enlist. As a matter of fact, there's a little story about enlisting. My mother tried to prevent me from going in the service because I was asthmatic. And as a young person, as a baby, from the time I was a baby, and a young person, I had terrible asthma. And she thought I could be exempt from the service. But I just didn't feel that way. I didn't want to do that. And so I talked her into letting me go ahead and follow through, and it did happen. A friend of mine who was asthmatic was exempted from the service. But I didn't want to go that route.
Okay. So in a way, you're kind of pulled between sort of, there's family pressure saying you really ought to just stay home, and then you figure, well, maybe I should do my part when called, or...
Yes, maybe my religion at that time might have had something to do with it, because all my friends and I belonged to the Quaker Church there in Richmond.
Okay, that's true. It's an old Quaker town. Yeah.
And it's an old Quaker town. There's several Quaker churches there. And my mother, we moved there from a farm, and my mother kind of explored the churches we tried the Second English Lutheran Church behind our house, and Mother didn't care for that too much, even though her family were Lutheran, I think. And then she went to the West Richmond Friends Church, and she loved the minister, and the people were nice, and so that's where we were. And I was with that church for my first 20 years of my life. So maybe that had something to do with my not wanting to enlist, and I wanted to stall it off as much as possible. I don't know.
Okay, so the draft notice does come. Where did you have to report?
I had to report to Fort Benjamin Harrison in Indianapolis, Indiana. They sent me there. I was there a week, going through all of the physicals and the paperwork, you might say. And then they sent me to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, after they had found out that I had in Purdue had some artillery training. So Fort Sill is where they sent the artillery people. Yeah.
Okay. Now, had you taken any kind of long train trips before that?
No, we traveled by car. Before the war, I can remember driving out to California with my mother and a doctor and his wife. And that was a long trip in the car back in 1939 or so.
Yeah.
And then another long trip was a vacation of ours in New York City. We drove, my dad drove. We went up to Minnesota in a long trip. I remember I was 18 at the time, just starting Purdue, and so Dad let me drive home from the lake where we were staying all the way back to Lafayette. It was a 13-hour drive, and I drove it straight through, and I was exhausted when I got there. But yes, we did take some long trips, but not on the train.
All right. So what was that train trip like?
Well, it was nothing unusual, because I'll tell you why. In Richmond was a rail center for the Pennsylvania Railroad, and it was right there in town, and a big train station, huge train station, and we saw trains all the time, so it was nothing new to me.
So how were you received when you got to Fort Sill?
Well, I had a few sergeants that really were tough. and they wouldn't let us get a speck of dirt on our shoes, and our beds had to be perfect in the barracks, and training, marching all the time. They just read the riot act at us all the time, you know. But they were nice guys, really.
How well did you do in that? I mean, were you able to stay clean most of the time? And...
Yes, I did well, and I'll tell you why. I was a Boy Scout, and in my younger days, and I felt that, hey, I've done this. You know. So anyway, but my stature, my being only 5'6" and 140 pounds or so, I'm marching there with 6-foot guys with long strides, and I'm trying to keep up and that sort of thing. So my marching wasn't all that great, but it was fun. And then when we had to go through calisthenics and all that, we had to about face some fella, and we were going to box that day. And I'd pick a guy who was 6'3", huge guy with a long arm reach, and I'm trying to hit him with my gloves. But we had, it was a fun time, really was. It was a hard-working time. We learned a lot about field artillery, about the guns and the surveying and the observation, and so we learned everything we knew about artillery there at Fort Sill.
Okay. Now, were the guys you were training with, were a lot of them guys who'd had some college time, or were they mostly straight out of high school, or who were they?
Well, I'd say most of them were not college people, really. But yet, I'd say well-educated, really. And we just had a great time. Made a lot of friends, a lot of new friends there. And so when our 13 weeks of basic training there at Fort Sill was over, we went our separate ways. Some of us were able to stick together, but others had to go somewhere else. And it was a kind of a sad day when you made such good friends. But after the training at Fort Sill, I was shipped around to at least a half a dozen replacement depots in the eastern United States, from one to another.
Did you have any idea why they kept moving you around?
Well, that's what we wanted to know. Well, maybe this time we'll go overseas now, or whatever. But no, I had no idea. I think they were just waiting for enough men that were trained for a certain job to take them overseas to let them do that job.
Now, what time frame are we talking about?
Oh, we're talking, at Fort Sill, I left there about May in 43.
Okay.
I shipped out in August 43. So about 5 to 6 months, I was from one replacement depot to the other. Camp Shenango in Pennsylvania, Camp Miles Standish, I don't know where that was. I might have been
up near Boston.
I was going to say near Boston or in Massachusetts. And did I say Patrick Henry?
No.
Patrick Henry, that must have been...
That was down in Virginia.
In the Virginia area. Those are 3 definite ones I remember. And when we got down to Patrick Henry in Virginia, then we were getting ready to ship out.
Okay. Now, when they shipped you out, where did they send you?
They sent us, we didn't know where we were going. They sent us was to North Africa. And I had to say a little something about that. We got aboard the ship, the troop ship. We were a part of a convoy. The sea was rough. A lot of fellas got seasick. We zigzagged across the ocean. It took us 23 days to cross from Virginia to Oran, Africa, where we landed.
Okay.
And as soon as we got through the Suez, or not
Straits of Gibraltar?
the Straits of Gibraltar, we knew where we were going. Oh, we're going to go to Africa.
All right. Now, when you were crossing the ocean in the convoy, were there submarine scares? Or
Yes, there were. Yes, we could go up on deck during the nights, but you could not light a cigarette.
Mm-hmm.
And the sleeping on the ships was 6-tier high, canvas kind of a hammock sort of cots, 6 high, and we were crowded in there like sardines.
Was it better to be on top or
We looked forward to get up on top deck there during the night.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of interesting, that watching us slice through the water at nighttime, because there was a fluorescent.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what.
There's phosphorus in the water. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Now you get into the Mediterranean. You land at Oran. What was that like? What did the port look like? What was going on there?
Well, the war in Iran, as far as the Americans were concerned, was over.
Mm-hmm.
And we set our replacement depot was on top of a hill back of Iran.
Mm-hmm.
And it was raining and muddy.
Mm-hmm.
And when the sun did come out, it was dusty, and the conditions, were miserable. Really, our food wasn't all that great, but we were able to have some times food that wasn't too bad. Of course, we did the usual training more and marching and calisthenics and keep us fit, and it was just the same old.
Did you have all because you were just replacement, so you didn't have equipment to speak of, or?
No, we did have. We called them barracks bags. I don't know what anyone else called them, but we called them barracks bags, and they were about that big around. And for a little fellow like me, carrying one of those on my shoulder, any miles at all, it's quite a task. I was able to do it, but boy, it wasn't easy. We did get equipment there. I think that's when we first got our gas masks, and gas mask, what's this for, But we had training for it in the States,
right.
And we never, ever carried a gas mask. No.
Well, fortunately, the Germans never used gas.
That's
so
right,
that worked
that's
all right.
right.
How long did you have to spend in the replacement depot before you got assigned to a unit?
I'd say, a month, maybe a little longer.
Okay.
Yes. We shipped out of Oran, and we went directly to Naples, Italy. That port had been bombed, and the ships were laying on the sides in the harbor, and it wasn't cleared very well.
Right.
But we did land in Naples, and then we went to a replacement depot in Naples. This is kind of odd, but it was in an extinct volcano, the floor of the volcano. And you could see the sides on all sides, going up to the rim. And that's where our replacement depot was, outside Naples. And it was good protection from the air raids that happened every night while we were there, because if you put a bomb right down that volcano, you hit the jackpot, but they hardly ever did, It
Right.
didn't happen.
Okay. How large were the air raids? Were there a lot of planes or just a few?
Not too many, and it didn't last too long. But once air raid siren sounded, I jumped out of where I was, jumped for a foxhole. We had foxholes dug around, or trenches.
Right.
I landed on a guy, and believe it or not, he was from Richmond, Indiana. So you never know. But so after that replacement depot, then the trucks came, and we loaded on our 6x6 heavy trucks, and they trucked us up to the front where our units were, our outfit.
Now, what unit did you join?
I joined the 34th Infantry Division, and I was placed in their artillery, field artillery, which was the 100 and C Battery, 175th Field Artillery Battalion in the 34th Division, and I was a forward observer.
How did you get that lucky?
I don't know how I was lucky, but I always enjoyed forward observing in the United States at Fort Sill. It was fun.
Yeah.
And I thought I knew something about it. And so when I got there, they had my records. Oh, field artillery. Oh, it's forward observing you've done. Okay, we'll put you in that job. There were about 3 different groups of us, and each group was 3 people: the lieutenant, the radio operator, and the instrument man. That would be me.
Okay.
Yes. And we were 3 groups, and we took turns up in the front, going to the infantry, where the positions, and we would then depend on the infantry lieutenant or captain or to give us information so that we could relate it back to our guns in the rear to fire on the enemy. And as forward observers, we were to find out where they were on the battlefield, and we would pinpoint that on our maps.
Right.
And then we'd send out a smoke shell to see our first shell to see where they were going to land.
Right.
And so my first time, I have to say this. I got asthma while I was there. And I had it pretty bad. And I went up to my captain. I said, Captain, I just don't think I can make it up there this time. Now, I'll be happy to go in somebody else's place at another time. But at this moment, I am having asthma. And knowing that I had to, after our Jeep took us as far as it could go, and then we got up and hiked up the mountains with the equipment we had, I just didn't think I could make it. And so I was truthful with him, and he said, all right, Kriegbaum, you think you can find somebody to take your place? Okay. And so just then, a truckload of replacements came in. Anybody here a forward observer? Yeah, I am, I says, would you like to take my place right now, and I'll take yours when your turn comes up? And he, well, sure, And so he did, and a few days later, when he got back from the front line, Kriegbaum, if I'd known what I was getting into, I would have refused.
Okay. Describe for us a little bit the situation on the front line. What sector were you in, or what area was your division operating in at that way? Is this a sort of late in 43 then when you get there?
Yes, it was. When I got there as a replacement, the division was making their crossings of the Volturno River in Italy. We crossed it 3 times, as a matter of fact. And that was really tough going because the infantry had to wade through the water. There was always rain and mud and cold, and this was getting close to winter time, so it was really cold and some snow sometimes. And the Volturno River went through a fairly wide valley, which was flat and mountains on each side for the Germans to observe every move we made. So we had to do it at nighttime mostly. And so that's where I entered my time, my job as a forward observer with the field artillery, helping out the infantry, 168th Battalion, regiment of the infantry.
Right. Describe your first time up there at the front as an observer.
Well, can't remember the first time too much, but about the second time I can recall very well. And it starts back at Richmond, Indiana, believe it or not. I hope you have time for all this.
Oh yeah, we have plenty of tape.
In Richmond, as a young lad, I had asthma very badly. I would not be able to play too much. I was watching a tennis game, my friends, and one of the friends said, "Bob, what's the matter with you?" I said, "Oh, I'm having asthma today." He says, "Oh," he says, "that's too bad." He says, "You won't live to be 21 if you have asthma." Imagine a comment like that.
Yeah.
I went home crying to my mother, and I never, to this day, have forgotten that comment. So here I am in Italy on my second forward observing job, and at that time we had gotten across the Volturno, and we were approaching Mount Pantano. Now that was really, really tough fighting for our infantry there at that mountain, on that mountain. So I finally got over my asthma. I went up the next time I was due to go up, and it was a struggle with all the equipment and the mud and the rain and the cold. The paths were just barely paths, to walk on. But we finally made it up to the infantry positions where they were holding back the Germans. There was constant counterattacks from one to the other, and the mountains, they gave you protection by their terrace slopes where the grapes vineyards were grown. And the terrace slopes would be walled with stone, and so you hugged that wall as close as you could for protection. And you built rocks that you could find in your area. You took those and piled those up around you. And because there was no dirt to dig a foxhole.
Right.
And I was up there a few days, and I was wondering if I was going to make it back down. Our infantry did retreat off the mountain, and so we had to retreat with them.
Right.
And we ran down the mountain, and my lieutenant had thick lens glasses, and he stumbled and fell, and they fell off and broke a lens, and he couldn't see. And so I helped him down the route and the rest of the way the best I could. And after that, the infantry regrouped, went back up again, and was able to get control. And that happened for several days. And it was really tough. I mean, it was mortar fire and machine gun fire and rifle fire and hand grenades and even rock throwing. Rock throwing. And so I just didn't think I'd make it, but actually I did. And when I got back to my outfit, it was December the 4th, 1943. It was my birthday. And I says, Charlie Peely, you old, I made it. I'm 21. And can you imagine that, all these years? So that was a story I had to tell.
Now, the men who were on the team with you, the lieutenant and the radio man, were these people who had been there before you were, or were you all new at that point?
No, they were there before me.
Okay.
Yes.
So they at least knew what
Lieutenant
they were doing.
Swartz was his name.
All right.
A radio operator, I can't remember his name.
Now, in that period of on that trip up and back and down the ridge, how close were the Germans getting to where you were?
They were a stone throws away, you know.
Okay.
I mean, they actually did throw stones when their ammunition ran out, or if their guns jammed, or whatever. And they had bayonets, you know, and ready, fixed, and
Were you carrying weapons yourself? Or?
as an artilleryman, I didn't have to. I did have a carbine, and which I carried, but I never had to actually use it. Yes.
Okay.
Fortunately, I wouldn't like to have killed anybody.
Right. Now, how long does this sort of situation last? Where, I mean, that there in the Volturno area, did they push beyond that pretty quickly, or?
No, it was slow, and we were working our way up toward Casino, and it was really slow going. It was miserable. I don't know why, but we were in that area from the time that my division entered Italy at Salerno to the Volturno River and Mount Pantano. We finally got relieved. We were in a combat situation for 2.5 months without relief. We'd go from sector to sector on the front line to support our infantry wherever they sent them. But for 2.5 months, we had wet feet, mud, and everything else.
Were a lot of men getting sick at that point?
Trench foot was a big issue. I later got sick, dysentery. Yes, they had their problems.
Now, were the artillery units taking much enemy fire themselves?
All the time, all the time. You'd be eating, well, one Christmas meal. Wow, Christmas meal, a hot cooked meal from our kitchen. We were happy to have turkey and dressing and all that, and we were sitting down close to the kitchen on these terraced slopes, and the Germans knew it was Christmas and that we'd be having our great time, you know, and so they decided to throw in a few rounds of artillery, and so we all made a dive for protection, and when I had my mess kit in my hand, and I was getting protection from the terrace wall, and the shells were landing up on the terrace above us, you know, and all the mud, rock, shrapnel from the shells were coming toward us, but of course we were kind of protected by the terrace wall, and it landed in my mess kit, you know, and my dinner was ruined. I wasn't too happy about that. Yes.
Now, did your unit get engaged at Casino before they pulled you out, or?
No, they pulled us out before.
Mm-hmm.
And
Where did they send you then once you're off the line?
well, they sent us back to a little town called San Angelo, I think, where we had gone through that town and chased the Germans out of there, and evidently it was a good enough place for them, the division, to set up a rest camp
Right.
before we went into Casino. We regrouped. We got new replacements, a lot of new replacements, because we lost a lot of men. And I can't remember, but I don't think we had new clothing. We wore the same clothes for, like I said, 2.5 months. It was always wet or muddy. And our shoes, our socks were always wet and muddy, and our shoes. We didn't have good equipment at that time, as a matter of fact. Our winter clothing equipment was not there, and we were unhappy about it because we had we wore fatigue uniforms, and those were just nothing but overalls to work in,
Right.
coveralls. We also had khakis to wear in the summertime, and ODs, we called them in the wintertime, olive drab wool
Right.
uniforms. And we had a light summer jacket. And that was about it. And I mean, temperatures were cold, and they didn't get our equipment to us. I understand the boys in the back rears helped themselves to what they wanted, but it never made it up to our place until later on. We finally did get some. That's for a while it was just miserable trying to keep warm and comfortable.
How long a rest did they give you?
Oh, I'd say about 3 weeks, something like that.
So when did you go in then at Casino?
Well, Casino must have been January.
Okay.
Yeah. I remember January the 1st, on top of a mountain. It was snow, cold, wind was blowing 40 miles an hour. Rain sometimes, but mostly snow this time, and cold. We were wet and miserable. And we had pup tents. Each man had a shelter half. We put those together and made a pup tent, and 2 of us slept in a pup tent. And to keep ourselves halfway warm, we had a number 10 size tin can that food came in, and we used it. We put charcoal in there and lit that up and put it at the foot of our tent to have the kind of wind gale blow it into us and keep us warm halfway.
Yeah.
Well, during the night, this is January the 1st, we woke up, both of us. Our tent was on fire. And huge flames, and oh my God, I hope the Germans don't see this. But we managed finally to get it out, and we just everything was burned. And so the next day was payday, and we were on top of this mountain. Of course, our command post was way down there on the bottom of the mountain, some comfortable place. And so I found my way down the bottom of the mountain to get paid. And the wind was blowing so hard, I would aim myself from one tree to the other to catch myself as I went down, so I wouldn't fall, and that sort of thing. I got down there and told the captain my problem, He says, well, that's too bad, Bob. Here, you can you can stay in my command car while we go back and get some new equipment for you, new clothes and all, which they did, which I was happy about. And so I stayed in his command car during that time.
So you left the other guy back up on top of the ridge?
Yeah, I don't know what happened to him. But I had to go down. He probably went down and got his pay also because it was happened to be payday once a month. And you're asking me when we went into the casino battle. I think it was, if I'll look here, probably okay, it was probably it was January the 1st, somewhere in there. I can't seem to find it, but it was shortly after the first of the year, 44.
44 at that point,
Yeah.
yes.
And we were at that area for at least, I'd say, a couple of months.
Now, was the action there about the same as it had been in the Volturno campaign, or was it worse for you? Or?
Well, the worst I ever had was on top of Mount Pantano. The second worst was at Casino. As an artillery person and on the survey crew, not the survey crew, but the forward observing crew, our infantry was not too, we were further back from our infantry. And the reason for that was because the Rapido River ran through Casino, and the Germans flooded the valley that the river ran in.
Right.
And and they also had laid minefields before they flooded the valley, personnel minefields. And it wasn't easy walking through a minefield. As a matter of fact, I have one story about that. The infantry, when I was with the infantry, they had to go through this minefield. And it was nighttime, they had to do it because they just couldn't wait any longer. They lined up in a single file. The man in front started walking through the minefield, and when he stepped on a mine and either blew off a leg or whatever had happened, he just dropped aside, and the next guy behind him continued on. And they walked about 1,500 feet that way through this minefield. And finally they made it, but they lost a few on the way.
Right.
Yeah. That was a horrible thing.
Now, as an observer, because you're also kind of in sort of a valley situation trying to fight your way up a hill, so as an observer, do you stay back so you can see the hillside, or?
Yes, no, to that question. If we had a good observation point on our side of the valley, and we could see the enemy good enough to fire upon them with our guns, our observation point would be back there. But if it wasn't, and we would be with the infantry, and they would cooperate with one another, and they would tell us what to do, and then we relay that back to our units, and the guns would fire, and that sort of thing. But one time in Casino, the town, the city, of course it was destroyed.
Right.
We were in the north end of the town, and we were sheltered inside of a house, and houses were, I mean, one right after it, the other they were joined, they're attached, and it was very heavy fighting, the artillery all the time, raining down on us, and we wouldn't dare go outdoors while the artillery was firing. We'd go out, when it was safe. But I was in this house, in this room, and I had to go to the bathroom. I don't know if I should say this or not, but I had to go to the bathroom the worst way. And so I didn't dare walk outdoors. But I just lowered my trousers in the corner of a room and just did a BM, right there. Our hygiene wasn't the best. Whenever we were at a rest area, we dug latrines and with boxed seats and all that sort of thing, deluxe. But out in the field, you just dropped your pants or did whatever you had to do. I remember I was doing that one time on a path in Italy, and here comes a mother and her daughter walked right by me. "Buongiorno," she says. I says, "Buongiorno." I was doing my job.
Well, country folk, maybe they see that kind of thing all the time.
Yeah, maybe. So anyway, Casino was a whole different story. There were many divisions there.
Right.
And we each had our sector. And we just couldn't do it, couldn't advance. What we wanted to do was push on past Casino and go up the Leary Valley to the west of Casino and going north toward Rome.
Right.
And but we couldn't even do that. We couldn't get there. And we had on Mount Trocchio. It was quite a strange mountain. It just came out of the ground like boom, boom.
Yeah.
And the Germans used that as an observation post as we were advancing toward that. But they realized that if they didn't get out of that position, they would have to give up because they would have no place to go. It's just placed high on the plain. So we got there and then we used it as an observation post. We had different other places in the area, but I can't recall them.
Now, did your division stay there on the line until eventually Casino was captured?
No.
Okay.
The reason why is, well, we'd been up there for about 2 months, and we had lost a lot of casualties, lots of casualties. And it was house-to-house fighting in the city. And the conditions were miserable. Oh, and of course, Mount Cassino, the Abbey on top of Mount Cassino, you'll have to know about that in this interview because that was quite a controversy. Whether we should shell that place or not, bomb it, because we felt the Germans were at the base of that abbey using the mountain as an observation point on all of our troops. And so, the day before we left the line, I think it was, about February the 15th, 1944, after trying to get past Casino, they called in the bombers from the Foggia field in South Italy, and the B-24s just bombed the living daylights out of that abbey. Just reduced it to ruins, you know. And the day that happened, we saw the bombers coming. It was a clear day. And we all just stood up, wherever we were. And we just yelled and hollered and hoop-de-doo because, boy, here we come. Finally, we'll get this thing taken care of. But it wasn't too, it didn't go over too well. And so there's a lot of talk about that, whether we should have done that or not. My reasoning was, it was a building, a sacred building to the what were they, not nuns, but the
monks up there.
the monks, the monks. And, but this happened to that building many times before. It were different armies in Roman times and all that. So that building was destroyed more times than when we got there. And they did eventually rebuild it just like it was originally. So that day, the following day, we were off the line, back in the rest area, and getting ready to do our next job, and that was in Anzio.
Okay. So the original Anzio landings were early in '44, so you're not part of that. You're on the casino at that point. So you're coming in as a reinforcement then?
That's correct. Our division came in later. I don't know how many days later, but it was later. And in the meantime, I had gotten ill with dysentery, and they sent me to the hospital in Naples. And I don't know how long I was there, a couple of weeks maybe. And my unit had moved out. And I was really unhappy about that because you want to be with your boys, your gang. And so when I got well, I hopped aboard a LST, landing craft LCT truck, and went up from Naples with others, of course, to Anzio, where I landed, and of course the beachhead had already been established, and maybe we had gotten 10 miles inland at the most, and there was somebody there to meet me, and okay, Kriegbaum, I see you were in such and such an outfit as a forward observer. What do you have in mind today? I said, well, I've had enough of this forward observing thing, and if you don't mind, I'll go to the instrument and survey section crew. Oh yeah, we got openings for that.
All right.
So how lucky I was to be able to go to that outfit, because even though we were still amongst the enemy troops out in the no man's land surveying our next gun positions, and we took a lot of artillery and fire and all that sort of thing from the enemy. In the survey crew, it was a lot nicer.
Okay. Describe a little bit what the survey crew does and how they do it, particularly what you started doing there at Anzio.
There were 7 of us in the group. We had a Jeep and a quarter-ton trailer for all our supplies and all our personal equipment. We had instruments that we used in surveying. We would go out on a reconnaissance with our captain.
Okay.
And he would walk around acres trying to decide where he wanted the gun placements to be. We had 105 howitzers as our gun. And after he decided, well, then it was the instrument and survey crew's duty to survey in the gun positions. They had base points, and I'm vague about this now, but it was just like a regular surveying crew. For each gun, we had to survey each gun in, and then we had a base point back here, and then that went back to our previous base point, the previous gun position and all that, so that we could continually keep track on a map where we were. And I'm so vague about that, but that's what our job as an instrument and survey was.
Now, when you're doing that, you said you were kind of out in no man's land. Will you actually advance in front of your own lines to do this?
Sometimes, but most times not. But sometimes. As a matter of fact, we were chased back several times, not several times, but a few times, just because we're stupid and thinking that, well, they don't see us, but they did. We thought we were hiding behind the hills, you know, and that sort of thing, as we were doing our job, but that didn't always work. Yes, we were out one time and did our job, and we were coming back, and we came upon a crossroad. Military police were always at a busy crossroad, and this crossroad was really busy. But it was stalled. There was many Jeeps and trucks there, all emptied, and all the guys were in the ditches alongside the road. And the Germans were harassing that crossroad with artillery fire. And they just kept it up, and we were anxious to get back to our outfit with all this going on. And I'm going to tell on myself here because it wasn't very nice that I did this. I finally got up, and I stood up, and there was one Jeep that stalled the whole works, you know, at the crossroad. I said, why doesn't the guy that owned that Jeep get up at there and move that thing out of the way so we can continue on? And somebody stood up, he says, would you like to do it? So that shut me up. And we just finally waited out the bombardment of artillery, and then we jumped on our vehicles and ran to get the hell out of there.
What was the situation like at Anzio when you got there? Were the Americans advancing at that point finally, or were they preparing to attack, or were they under attack?
When we got there, everything was stalled. We got to our position on the line where they wanted the 34th Infantry to be. And then they just settled in. The infantrymen dug their foxholes and made it as comfortable for themselves as they could. This was getting close to springtime, I think. And so it wasn't bad. The weather was fairly decent. But in the daytime, you did never dare to move because they were on the hills above the beachhead, observing every move we made. So we did nothing in the daytime. We played cards or cribbage or whatever, or read Reader's Digest or anything else we wanted to do, play poker. Or anyway, because there was nothing going on, nothing, just harassing fire, harassing fire. They didn't attempt to
break out of there.
To break out of that beachhead at first. And so our outfit, our little 125th Field Artillery Battalion, set up camp in a couple of farmhouses, vacated farmhouses. We, and to protect ourselves, the farmhouses weren't always safe because I was at an observation post in one of the farmhouses, had a artillery shell right stuck in the wall. That didn't fire, that didn't explode. So farmhouses weren't all that safe, but to make it safe for us, we dug a huge hole outside the barn.
Okay, I'm going to have to stop us here.
Okay.
And change. Now, before we pick up here at Anzio, you wanted to add something else about North Africa before we continue.
Yes, and my division, the 34th Infantry Division. In North Africa, after we landed in Oran, and then we took a 48 trip across North Africa through the mountains to Bizerti. A 48 is what they used in the First World War. It's a boxcar on a rail train where they had 40 men and 8 horses. Only this time we had more than 40 men and no horses. And so we took this 500-mile trip across North Africa on this 48 car, and took us 5 days. It was slow going through the mountains, and so to get exercise, we'd jump out of the boxcar, run along the side of the car, and then jump back in, just for exercise.
Did you lose any guys that way?
No, we didn't lose any, but we almost did at times, if they couldn't keep up. But we were able to do that. And that was an experience, And then talking about the 34th Infantry Division, we're a group of men from Minnesota, Iowa, North and South Dakota. They were, what they were units from the National Guard. And when the war started, they were federalized and became one huge unit, the 34th Infantry Division, and they went to maneuvers in Louisiana before anything else. And then after Louisiana, the war started December the 7th, 1941. In January 42, they were the first outfit to be sent to Europe. They landed in Northern Ireland, where they trained for half a year or more, and units of the division were cut off to form other outfits like the 1st Rangers, whose job was to sabotage the Germans wherever they could, in Norway or whatever. And then, after that, the 34th Division was selected to invade North Africa with others, of course. And so we went in at Oran and Algiers, and the other one was Casablanca, 3 places. The French Vichy government troops who were on the side of the Germans met us there in North Africa. They fought us a little while, but it didn't last long, and things were under control. Then our 34th Division moved eastward as fast as we could to go to Tunis, where we were going to meet up with General Rommel of the German Tank Corps, called the Africa Corps, and he was called the Desert Fox, of course. But anyway, and we did meet him in North Africa, Tunisia, where the 34th got their first taste of combat. And it was a disaster. Yeah, they were defeated at Fondouk Pass. They were defeated at Kasserine Pass. And the British were beginning to think, hey, these guys can't fight. They didn't have any faith in us at all. We were separated from our unit now and then and attached to the British to do certain jobs. The Germans had come all the way from
El Alamein.
yeah, there's another place. They had come from the Suez Canal area.
Well,
They had worked their way there, but the British finally stopped them and started pushing them
Right.
back west. And one huge battle was at Tobruk.
That's all getting pretty far off of track, really, for us, because
Yeah.
other stories and stuff
Okay,
cover
okay.
that.
Well,
But
I just-
the main thing I think that's important for you to point out is that the 34th took a real beating in its first action. They
Yes.
acquired initially a pretty bad reputation.
Yes.
They changed that reputation in Italy.
Yes.
But initially that was the assumption. So you joined a
Yes.
group who are really going into another round of fighting and have that record to deal with
Yes,
and so
yes.
forth. Okay, now let's get back to Anzio and so forth. You were talking about getting settled in properly. Well, how comfortable did you manage to get when you were in Anzio?
We got very comfortable, to tell you the truth. We had this farmhouse that was rectangular and had a barn attached to the rear of the house where the cows stayed and the chickens and whatever else, pigs, whatever.
Were the cows and chickens still there?
Well, no, not too much. There were a few. We always had our share of meat from cows, and we had a few chickens now and then and eggs. But what we did was we dug a huge hole on the outside of the barn and dug under the foundation of the barn. We dug all this, and up through the floor, dirt floor inside. So, and then we piled the outside with sandbags and telephone poles that we chopped down and railroad ties, whatever we could find. And sandbags and dirt, and had a really nice entrance to the barn inside from the outside if we ever got caught in a situation where we had to make a fast move. So we lived inside the barn, mostly, and inside the house for that matter. And I have to say that there was always barrels of grain in the houses, and at nighttime the rats would come out, and you would be sleeping on the floor upstairs or something like that. In the blankets you had, we didn't have shelter. I mean, we didn't have
Sleeping bags?
sleeping bags at the time. But anyway, we carried as many blankets as we could to keep warm. I had about 10, and that wasn't easy to carry. But anyway, we'd be sleeping there, and the rats would come out at night, and they'd run right across your face, you know. And whatever. Anyway, but otherwise it was pretty good. We had a light hooked up from our Jeep, and we had a radio that we could use and listen to, so we could hear Axis Sally with her Lily Marlene music and all that, and Don't You Wish You Could Be Home, you know, and all that sort of thing. And so we had it fairly comfortable, except that when they decided to shell us. One huge shell was called, we called it Big Bertha. It was a huge German rifle, huge. I don't know how big the shell was, but it was huge. And it was on a railroad car, and they kept it in a railroad tunnel. And at time they'd bring it out, they'd fire a few rounds at us at the beachhead, and toward the water where all the ships were. And you could hear it, bong. You could hear it go all the way until it hit whatever it landed on. But we kind of got a kick out of that, because that was a nightly thing. We could set our watches by it. And then I forgot to mention that the screaming Mimis, we call them screaming Mimis. I don't know if you heard that
Those were the
word
rocket
before.
launchers, right?
That was that mortar that worked like a 6-shooter.
Yeah.
I mean, it had 6 barrels.
Yeah, it
and
was a
it
6-barrel rocket
fired.
launcher, basically.
Yeah. That was a scream. We called them screaming memes because they did scream. It was just a horrible noise going through the air. But of course, then you fairly knew where they were going. So you said, well, I better find some shelter or I won't have to bother, you know. But so the screaming memes, I had to put that in. Now we're back to Anzio. And I would say that happened until, the 1st of June. And we finally decided that we better move on because the weather's good and we got to get on with the job.
And Cassino had finally fallen, so they're moving up
And
from the
Cassino
south.
had fallen, and the Germans were falling back from Cassino up our way. And here's, I had to tell this on my general, General Mark Clark. Clark was, he liked to be a part of the show. And so he liked to be the first here, the first there. And he wanted to be the first in Rome, to conquer Rome, you know. So he got orders instead to capture all the Germans coming up from Cassino, and so that they wouldn't be involved in the combat anymore. And then we could dispose of those fellas, and then we could go into Rome and go on from there. He disobeyed his orders, and he went into Rome. And he didn't, I don't know what happened to the guys coming up from the Cassino. They probably...
Most of the Germans got out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, so we started on our road to Rome. That was about the first week in June, and then I think it was June the 5th or 4th we got into Rome. Of course, it was an open city, so there was hardly any damage or destruction. But they wouldn't let the 34th Division stop and be included in all the joy from the citizens, you know, the parade and all of that. We had to keep moving, and they wouldn't let us stop. As long as we had the Germans on the run, we were going to keep them running. So we did go through the outskirts of Rome, and but continued on north and west toward the Tyrrhenian Sea, Tyrrhenian Sea, and on our way. This is a little story. On our way, at nighttime, I was on guard duty, and we were at Santa Marinella, Marinello, stopped there for the night, and I was on guard duty, and yet we had firing in the distance, harassing fire or whatever, and you could hear the sound all the time. And it was loud enough that while you're on guard duty, you can sing to yourself, and nobody would hear you. So I'm out there just crooning away all these songs I've been hearing from the States, you know. And I had that day received a letter from my girlfriend back home in Richmond, Indiana, and we called them Dear John letters, saying that she had met another fellow, she was getting married, and we could be platonic friendships and that sort of thing. And I was rather sad about that, and it took me 2 weeks to get over it, but I finally did. And I says, well, when I get home, there are a lot of other girls that are the nicest one I had. And but it took me 2 weeks to get rid of that little story. Then from there on, we chased the Germans up the west coast of Italy. It was mostly pitch and run, you know, and we wouldn't let them stop and dig in, and we got to towns like Civitavecchia and Leghorn. Livorno is the name of Leghorn. And got up to Pisa, where we stopped, and we met the 91st Division there, Pisa. That was an all-black infantry division. They had white officers, but we supported them in their area there for a while before we were assigned to go over to Florence, Italy. So we loaded aboard and made the trek along the Arno River to Florence. And we were in the Florence area quite a while. Got to see a lot of beautiful things in Florence. The Ponte Vecchio, you know, crossing the Arno River was there. They hadn't destroyed it, so we saw it. And David and all the
cathedral and all that kind of thing.
just everything, just beautiful. And but anyway, then we had to start working, back to work, and we drove the Germans north out of Florence. There were two main highways. When there are highways, there were two main highways, 65 and 64, that we drove them north on, up into the mountains out of Florence. High mountains. By the way, mountains in Italy weren't just little knolls. They were mountains, anywhere from 3,000 to 6,000 feet high. And to get around on those mountains without any roads, if you had a cow trail, you would be lucky. Wasn't easy. Our guns moved those around to support our infantry. We just had a heck of a time. But in the mountains, of course. So here we are in the mountains again, and got stalled. Couldn't move any further. And it was the middle of the winter, cold, miserable, muddy. One time I was in our Jeep. By the way, we called them Jeeps. In our outfit, I don't know where this came from. We called them Peeps.
Okay.
Peeps. Okay. I think it came from the British, because when our outfit was in North Africa and attached to the British called them Peeps. So we just picked up the word and called them Peeps. But everybody else was Jeeps. But anyway. So winter set in. It was miserable. I got out of the Jeep once to lighten the load. We had 7 guys. Some of us had to ride on the trailer, the quarter-ton trailer load. And so I jumped out to lighten the load, so we'd go up this little hill, little knoll, not very much. But it was so muddy. When I jumped out, I went up to my knees in mud. My shoes, my boots were wet, my socks, my legs, everything was just mud and water. It was miserable. But we got out, and we had to get out and push because we couldn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
So anyway, finally we got to our gun positions where we settled in for the winter. And set up our guns and went to our observation posts. Even then, I did a little observation work, even though I was in the survey crew. I have that picture I showed you as observation from the mountains down into Bologna. Anyway, we were there for I don't know how long, several months. during the winter. And it just miserable. We couldn't do anything. The Germans didn't want to do anything. They couldn't do anything either. So it was just nothing more than harassing fire and setting out on patrols and to see what the other guy was doing we spent some holiday time there also, if I'm not mistaken, and we housed in with a family of Italians in their farmhouse. It must have been Christmas.
Yeah, could well be.
Because I remember sitting by their fireside, and they were boiling chestnuts, and so we were picking out chestnuts and eating chestnuts over by the open fire. You know, it was really comfortable and warm for a change, and we just talked back and forth with the Italians the best we could, and we sang songs with each other, and it was a fun time, something different. And one time in one of the homes, the mother even made us spaghetti, Italian spaghetti, not like anything you see here, but it was completely different, but it was spaghetti as they knew it. And we had a big old spaghetti dinner. So anyway, we wasted our time there. Oh, that was when my brother-in-law, who was in the Navy as an ensign, visited me in Italy. He landed in Livorno, I think it was, where the ship landed. He was able to confiscate a Jeep. He didn't know exactly where I was, but you can find out where people are by just asking, especially MPs. You know, they know where all their traffic is going and where they are, and so that's what he did. He just went from one person to another, and he finally found his way right to my front doorstep. You know, it was morning time. I was just arriving out of bed, and we had at that time we were snowed in and had 8-man tents pitched, and I was getting up and shaving, cleaning up, trying to look halfway decent. Half of the time we didn't. Our hair was always way too long, and our beards grew way too long. But so this gave us a chance to kind of clean up a little bit. We'd heat up some water, put in our helmet on a little Coleman stove, and heat up our water and shave. But anyway, he arrived, and I was shocked to see him. But I was so happy that he was there, and he and I ate breakfast with the officers, and we didn't have sea rations where there's at the officers' mess, but as an enlisted man, all you had was sea rations, which were a can of beans, a can of hash, and a can of stew. And then later we got K rations, was boxed food, kind of dried food, I think. Can't remember. But so we ate in our officers' mess, and after that I took him on a tour of our gun positions, showed him the big guns that we had attached to us, the 240s, the 155s, and of course our own 105s. And then I got in his Jeep, and we drove up a road, damaged as it was, with shell marks, holes and everything, to the top of the mountain where we had an observation post. On top of this mountain, a huge mountain, you could see for miles after you got up there. And of course it was located in a destroyed church on top of the mountain. And I showed him around, and we looked through the scope and all that sort of thing, what we could see. And then we came back down, then he wanted to get home before dark, so he took off. But that was quite a experience to see my brother-in-law.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so finally, after several months there, and spring came,
Mm-hmm.
and it was time to move on. By the way, of course, the invasion of France had started, and
Oh, yeah.
so we were kind of a second fiddle, by after Rome,
Right.
and so no one paid any attention to us. But we were about our business anyway. So the fighting began out of the mountains, northern Apennine mountains, into the valley where Bologna was located, and the Po Valley. We it was tough fighting to get out of there because they just were stubborn. They had built fortifications for months before they even got there, planning on that as one of the lines that they would defend. And so it was tough for us to try to push them out of there. We finally did, and got down into Bologna, where the partisans and the civilians and the politicians were all engaged to greet us, and had a real big party, But we couldn't stop. We had to keep on moving. And so we took up off on the Highway 9, I think it was, which was a highway that went up diagonally through the Po Valley toward Piacenza, where you could cross the Po River at that place if you wanted to do it there, which we thought we would do it there. So we were on the tail of the Germans all the way there, up that highway. We didn't let them stop for a minute, and we bypassed them. I mean, they got lost and they would straggle behind us, and we didn't care. That whoever followed us would pick them up, And so we got up there, Piacenza, and found out we couldn't cross the river there. So
why not?
I'm not quite sure.
Okay.
I think the bridge was gone.
Okay.
I'm not sure of that. But anyway, so we had to retreat, go all the way back down toward Bologna. I think we went down as far as Modena, and then we went north from there to the Po River, and we got across there. And then we made our way up across the Po Valley into Brescia, and Bergamo, and some of the other towns. We went through that town where Romeo and Juliet originated from.
Okay, Mantua maybe, or
I'm
one of
not
those?
quite
Yeah.
sure. I have it, but I don't, at this moment, I don't remember. But anyway, so we're still running really fast and chasing them as fast as we could.
Were you seeing many German prisoners at this point?
Oh, we saw, well, in North Africa, we
Well-
took over 150,000 prisoners. I mean, the boys before I
They
got
had that
there.
already, but in terms of your unit at this point,
And
you've seen-
I'll tell you about that at the end of the story.
Okay.
Yes, we saw prisoners all along the way, and they were just sadly beaten up. I don't know how they stood it, because they took off bombing from our artillery, our mortars, our machine guns, our bombs, and anyway, I kind of felt sorry for them. But anyway, we did get to, we were headed for Milan, and we finally got there, and the partisans and the people wanted us to stop and go in the city and see Mussolini hanging by his heels in the square there with his mistress, Eva, I think her name was.
She was Carla or Clara or something like that. Eva was Hitler's.
Oh, Eva, you're right. Eva was Hitler, but her name, I can't remember. But here he was hanging up by his heels in the square. And, but But we kept on going nevertheless and chased the Germans. Now I think they were trying to get to Switzerland.
Or maybe into Austria.
Or in Austria. In our sector, I think it was mostly
Yeah,
Switzerland.
Switzerland would have been due north of you.
Yeah. Because we were on the northwest side of the country by that time.
Yeah.
And so we went north out of Milan, and chased them to Ivrea. Now Ivrea is at the foot of the Alpines,
Yeah.
where a pass goes through into Switzerland. And we thought that's what they were trying to do. But anyway, we didn't stop there. We chased them to, wait a minute, I have it reversed. We first went from Milano to Biella, where that went up through the mountain, passed to Switzerland. And then from there we went, the war had ended. It ended in in May, and it ended in Italy, May the 2nd, 1945. And we were in Ivrea, Italy, at the time the war ended. And now the prisoners. After the war was over, we had all these prisoners to round up. And so we bivouacked in Ivrea, the town of Ivrea, our 34th Division. We had a huge field that we set up where the Germans could surrender, huge field, and throw out their guns, anything that they had, throw it into a pile in the center of this field. So my captain came up to me, he says, "Kriegbaum, I want you to get a Jeep driver, go out to that intersection out there and wait. And at noontime, the Germans will come in whatever they have and surrender. I mean, will come to you at that point. And you direct them into this field in Ivrea, where they will surrender all their arms." I thought, how the hell did I get that job? But anyway, he must have thought I could speak German or something.
Kriegbaum.
Yeah.
That must be it.
So anyway, so I got a Jeep driver. We went out to this intersection. He dropped me off. I thought he was going to stay with me, but he takes off and goes back. And I'm standing there all alone, and I'm kind of scared stiff because I don't know what I might expect. And all of a sudden, around noontime, they came from everywhere. I don't know. They just came with whatever they had. Mules, monkeys, mules, and donkeys, and just anything. Hardly was any of their equipment, like trucks,
Right.
because they didn't have any
Or
left.
they didn't have any fuel.
No fuel. And anyway, they came with all kinds of transportation to get there, and they stopped. They did have one truck, and the lead truck stopped at the intersection there and stopped and looked at me, and I looked at them. I couldn't speak a word of German. I didn't know what to say. And they kind of looked puzzled. Well, okay, what's the next move? So I jumped aboard on the running board of the truck, and I says, "This way!" In English, of course. And so they followed my directions to the field, and all the others trailed along behind. There were hundreds of them. There were thousands of them. And they circled that field, and they threw in all their P-38s and their German Lugers and their machine guns and everything else they had in the way of weaponry. And that pile got to be really high. I mean, really high. And then from there, I don't know where they took them. But I had done my job, and I was in a house in the town there where I bivouacked, and I was sleeping. I was on guard duty that night, and so I went out and helped myself to a few pistols, new ones, practically, and no one saw me, of course. Thank goodness. And I helped myself to a couple of German pistols and brought them back to the place where we were staying. I was showing the boys. I says, boy, and they were interested in seeing them too, I says, I wonder if this pistol works. I pulled the trigger, bang! A shot went up through the floorboards through the second floor, up between two guys sleeping up there, and somebody, I think it was the officer of the day, who fired that shot? I don't know, that sort of thing. And boy, I would have been in bad trouble if I'd been caught. But anyway, and then I had a story. I told my children, my family, about the prisoners. I says, 40,000 prisoners, I told my family, and children, grandchildren, surrendered to me. I said, 40,000, and that's how many did surrender. But not all of them surrendered to me. The first group surrendered to me, but those that followed in 2 to 3 weeks later, they were still doing this, surrendered, and there were a total of 40,000. So my story to my family, and I thought was kind of funny, but I finally wised them up. Just the first group surrendered, and I was the one they surrendered to. And so that was the end of the hostilities. Now, after the war, we were still there in Italy. I was fortunate enough. They sent us from Ivrea. Our unit, our 34th Division, was sent to San Remo on the Italian Riviera to keep peace between the Italians and the French all over the border there area. They were just fighting each other like mad just to gain control. And so we had to keep peace with them, keep them out of each other's hair. And we set up bivouac in a American villa called Villa King in San Remo. Huge, kind of a palace-like place, beautiful inside. I mean, we'd never seen anything like this, because anything we'd seen was destroyed right down to the ground. And we stayed there, I don't know, maybe a couple of months. And of course, we went back to the old Army stuff, drill, inspection, KP, and all the other things that went along with it. However, we did meet a lot of Italian girls and families, and they would do our laundry for us and ironing. And so we had clean clothes for a change. And I met a few that I took up with, corresponded with afterward. We even dated, and along with the mothers who came along on our dates, and we went to dances and that sort of thing. Of course, I couldn't dance very well, but it was being with the girls that mattered, and having fun.
Now, were the girls angling for American husbands at this point, as far as you can tell?
Well, we thought so, yeah. And so I have some beautifully written letters from especially one of them, Luciana was her name. And their poetry and their writing is just out of this world. You wouldn't believe how they could write. And so we struck up a correspondence. I give her my addresses that I moved around in northern Italy, and so she would send me a letter, and I had her address, so I could send her something. But yes, we thought maybe they would like to hatch on to a GI and go back to USA. But she, Luciana, claimed that wasn't her purpose. She loved me, you know. And
now, while you were in northern Italy there after the war, you were sort of doing border work on the French and Italian border.
yeah,
And then did they also send you over toward the Yugoslav border?
yes, they did. Just one thing, I did meet up with my scoutmaster in Marseille, France, while I was over there in San Remo. We spent the day together. And then they finally, and another thing I have to say, I was chosen to go take a Jeep and go to Turin, Italy, for whatever reason, I don't know. I can't remember why I had to go. But there was a convoy of about 3 of us in Jeeps. The roads were terrible. Roads just were terrible to get to Turin, across the mountains and everything, from the sea, from the water edge. And I stopped. We're not supposed to pick up hitchhikers, but I stopped and picked up an old woman and mother and her daughter, and they were carrying a huge load. And I thought, my gosh, so they put their load in the Jeep in the front, and then they sat in the back with whatever else they had, and we took off. Well, the roads were so bad. It was like this. It was just choppy all the way to Turin. And all of a sudden, on the floor of the Jeep, olive oil all over the floor of the Jeep. And what they had in these covered sacks was huge glass jars of olive oil. Huge. I mean, they were big. I don't know how they carried them. I didn't think they expected to carry them. But so one of them broke, and all their olive oil, their black market olive oil, went all over the floor of the Jeep. And I could hear them swearing and cussing. They were really mad. So that was just an experience going to Turin. And by the time I got back from Turin to San Remo, I was dusty. You couldn't even see my face. I was caked with dust, and I was filthy dirty, my uniform. And then we moved on. From there, the Army sent us, our 34th Division, to Udine, where we bivouacked in Udine. And that was in the area around Trieste, Italy, on the east side of the country, where we had to keep peace between the Italians and the Yugoslavians, because they each wanted Trieste as their own. And so they were fighting back and forth about that situation. And we bivouacked there for, I don't know, a couple of months more maybe. But anyway, it was hot. The war was over. It was May, it was June, it was July, and it was really hot. We walked around the bivouac area in our undershorts, and that was all. And at that time we got our first ration of Russian vodka. And each man got a half a canteen cup full of vodka. Nobody had ever drank vodka before. We didn't know what it was. So, this tastes pretty good. I mean, it's just almost tasteless. But it went down really fast and really well. And you would never see such a bunch of drunken guys in all your life just falling all around the area. But that was part of our living in the Army. And by the way, I found out later after I got home here, not too long ago, where that was considered an area for ribbon.
Mm-hmm.
And I could send for that if I wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't done it. But anyway, that's just to show another campaign area.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, one of the other things that your family mentioned was the chicken coop story. So I have to ask, what's the chicken coop story?
Oh, okay, the chicken coop story. We were down around the casino, South Casino area, around Volturno area, where the river crossing was. It was cold, it was muddy, it was windy, and rainy, and to get out of the rain, the captain and his crew bivouacked in a nice home or house, and we would have to bivouac outdoors.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we happened to find a chicken coop on the premises. It was about 6 by 6 by 8 feet long, and it was out of the weather. So we got our shovels we carry along with us, little trench shovels.
Right.
And we dug and scraped the floor as best we could. We got out our shaving lotion and everything. We dropped that all around to get some kind of perfume odor in there. And it happened to be the night of my unit guard duty.
Mm-hmm.
So there were 5 of us in this. Could get into this chicken coop, lay out our blankets. We didn't have sacks at the time, and be fairly comfortable. Fairly comfortable. At least we're out of the rain. And so each one of us has stand guard duty. The way we did it was unethical. It was against the rules of the game. But nevertheless, we didn't want to stand out in the rain. And so what happened was my turn. I was on the end, the stand guard duty for 2 hours. So I woke up, I stayed awake for 2 hours, and after 2 hours was over, I punched the next guy to me, and he woke up. He stayed awake for 2 hours. And in the meantime, I went back to sleep, and then he poked that guy next to him for the 5 of us, and that's the way we stood guard duty that night. If the officer of the day knew that, he wouldn't have been too happy. But I don't suppose he got out in the rain either.
Probably not.
So we thought we were safe. And the kids always got a kick out of that, you know. The way we stood guard duty that night. There were times when guard duty really meant something, and you had to be on the alert. But sometimes it didn't matter.
Right. Okay. So then, after Udine, did they then eventually ship you out?
Finally, they, if I'm not mistaken, we had to go by 40 and 8 all the way back down to
Naples?
Naples. Yeah. That's the way we got down there. And in the meantime, some of our boys had already gone home because they were the original soldiers of the 34th Division, and they had many points. They could have gone any time. And so they left in San Remo, a lot of them. And all that brings up another thing about the division. We were not only the 1st Division overseas in the European theater of operation, and the 1st Division, American Division, in combat in North Africa, along with others, but we were the first there. And there was another first we had as a division. Our division chalked up over 600 days of combat time on the front line. 600 days. No other division came close at that time. And I myself had 430 days combat time to my credit, being up with the infantry and that sort of thing. So I thought I'd throw that in. I thought it was kind of important to me anyway. So anyway, we got in the 40 and 8s and went down to Naples. We, I don't know where we bivouacked, but anyway, we weren't there very long, and we were trucked to the dock there in Naples, where we were waiting for our ship to go home. And I have pictures of a group of the boys, you know, that were on the dock with me as we, just before we boarded the ship. And we, then it took us only, instead of 23 days like going over to North Africa, it took us about 19 days or less going back. Yeah. Or it could have been the only, I don't know how many days, but it was considerably less.
You didn't have to zigzag.
We didn't have to zigzag across. Excuse me, can you?
Okay, I can pause that.
Let me see, before, I just want to kind of glance to see if I left out anything.
All right.
You can see I had some notes here, but we were always proud of the 34th Division. We thought that we, after North Africa, that was a period of learning, believe me. I mean, those guys had never done anything like that before, and we just didn't do well, but they learned.
Well,
and
they were
learned
put in
fast.
they were put in a very bad position by
Yes.
their superior officers.
Yes.
So, and in that situation, any green division or even a well-trained division would have had real trouble.
Or I might say here and now that the 100th Infantry Battalion, Japanese American troops, they were attached to our division in Italy. So we fought alongside with the 100, and they were part of the 442nd Regiment of Nisi. Yeah, they were wonderful soldiers, and they did a wonderful job. They got lots of honors, lots. Besides them, we fought alongside British, Polish, French, Italian even, Indian, Australian, New Zealanders. We had them all. And we all were, mostly all of us were at Casino in one form or another, at different periods of time during that time we were there. So we had quite a fighting force there. And I imagine Churchill wanted that Italy to be invaded to keep other Germans away from the Russian front, or maybe even when they went into France. Yeah. So we were kind of a forgotten group after everything else became important, and we were kind of not really angry, but we were upset about it. You know, I mean, hey, we're not doing this for nothing. You know, but that's the way it was, and so that's the way it was.
Now, when did you actually get back to the States?
Well, I got back in November, and after our trip across, we landed. I was thinking New York City, but maybe it was back in Newport News. I'm not sure. Did that my book
That was
say?
Newport News. That was
Okay.
right, yeah.
So actually, there weren't too many people to be there to celebrate our return, like in New York City.
Right.
But we were happy to be home. We all stood on one side of the boat to see the dock, and we had to redistribute our weight so that he could dock. And there was nobody there to meet us. But we were sent on different trains back to our home states, where they had mustering out places. Mine was in Camp Atterbury in southern Indiana, where I was mustered out of the service. Funny thing, the first thing they ask you, would you like to sign here for extra duty, you know? I said, no, I've had my share of it. I think I've done my share. And no, thank you. I do not want to be in the reserves.
Right.
And so they gave me $5.10. That was my train fare home to Richmond from Indianapolis, or at Camp Atterbury. And of course, there was a lot of paperwork done there before they left. I left, and then I got on the train and went home. And I'm not so sure that folks even knew I was coming home. I can't remember that too well. You'd think I would. I remember they were there when I left, naturally, and my girlfriend. But coming home, I just kind of snuck up on them. Hey, Mom, I'm home. That was quite an experience.
Okay. Now, we're about here at the end of the tape, and I just kind of close it out a little bit. I'd like to ask, how do you think your time in the service affected you as a person, or?
Well, I think it made me a better person. I really do. To get off the subject just a second, I was over in Ann Arbor at my youngest daughter's home. She's an engineer, and she lives there in Ann Arbor in an apartment. Her daughter there, my granddaughter, had an assignment with her high school. She's a senior in high, about the same thing. And while I was over there one time, she said, she came up to me, Grandpa, can I interview you for your time in the service? So we sat down for 2 hours, and I did nothing but talk. And she just scribbled away, you know, trying to make notes. And she had to have this thing in the next day. And so she worked all night on it practically, with the computer and all. And she handed it in the next day, and they gave it back to her a few days following. And they asked her, well, what'd you learn, Emily? And so she says, well, I didn't really learn too much about the war, she says, but I sure learned a lot about my grandfather, about my character, and that sort of thing. And I appreciated that because I've always been trying to be a good person. And
did you go back to college when you got back?
Yes, I did. I had the GI Bill, of course, to lean on. And so I thought, Am I college material? I think my wife would not like to hear this on this interview, because she thinks I belittle myself. Can I handle it after being in the service for about 3 years, 2 years, 9 months? So I went back to Earlham College in Richmond, Indiana. It was a Quaker school.
Right.
A nice school, by the way. Small, but really nice school. Had a great reputation. I was able to handle that. By the way, one of my classes in political science, I think it was at Earlham, I had to write an essay, and what I chose was the occupation of Trieste.
I knew a little bit about that one.
Yeah. Anyway, and I got an A on it. Anyway, what was I going to say? Oh, yes. I've lost my train of thought.
Well, just quickly, what line of work did you go into in the end?
Oh, yes. I went back to Purdue and went 1/2 semester, met my wife, decided we'd get married. We quit college, both of us. She went to Miami University, Oxford, Ohio. And we got married, went to San Francisco on our honeymoon and lived there for a couple of years, where I had gone to Purdue for the School of Forestry. I wanted to be in Forest Service. And in a private enterprise like warehouse or something like that. But I changed my mind after being in the service, and I thought my next best love would have been a hardware store, a retail hardware store of my own. And my grandfather had a hardware store, and I always went to it as a child, and went to his store. So anyway, in San Francisco, I joined a wholesale hardware outfit and learned the hardware business from the ground up, from the warehouse, and shipments and receiving and ordering and all that, up to selling the warehouse. And then I came home, and I went to Vassar, Michigan, opened up a hardware store, and that was it.
All right, and that's it for the tape, too.
Yeah.
So, very good.